Hi, this is me, and Mark, who's not looking at the camera, is over there. We're live again, 2 p.m. on a Saturday, and it's Relationship Rebellion. And Mark, you wanted to get your what you? Oh, I can't think of the word.
Soz, have you fallen to pieces?
I have fallen to pieces.
Okay. Last time we were here, we were talking about relationships and the fact that they're not a natural circumstance and they're doomed to failure.
What were we talking about?
Unless you're going to interrupt me throughout the entire thing. Hang on a minute. I've got a secret contingency plan for this sort of thing, all right? Because before I talk about personal management and therefore management of her, I'm now going to show you my secret method that I rely upon in all of these things. It goes like this.
What?
Do what you're told. Okay.
Look, why don't you just introduce today's topic without going through this palaver? Then I might not laugh so much.
You're a mess, Sorrel.
I am!
Put it together.
It's too much coffee.
So, where did we leave last time?
Well, you said you wanted to talk about skill sets.
I do. Because if you're going to have a relationship of any degree of stability, I suppose you have to be able to manage. We have to be able to manage ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to be able to not be grumpy. We have to be able to not be hostile. We have to all those defensive, all the bloody arguments that people get into.
Yes.
Well, whilst they're trying to have a relationship, that has nothing to do with having a great relationship. And so skills might involve knowing how not to take it personally. That's number one.
Yep.
Which can often be learning how not to listen.
Oh, I don't know about that.
But that's not a good idea.
No, that's not
So not taking it personally and being able to manage our responses. And, you know, the reason you and I get on so well is because I don't get angry with you.
No, you don't, ever.
No.
You sometimes get a bit snappy.
Yes.
But that's fine, because that's probably because I'm being really irritated.
Well, no, it's not actually you. It's just that I'm snappy. You see, that's the whole thing.
You're having a snappy mood.
Yes, absolutely. Mood. And, you know, this is how you know that I'm not a psychopath.
Oh, I could tell the story about the razor.
If you insist, carry on. Step up.
But maybe it doesn't have anything to do with skill sets. Yeah. It does, actually. Are you ready to let me tell the story about the razor blades?
Yes.
Okay, so we were in Sainsbury's. When was this like? Maybe last year or the year before. And Mark was looking at razor blades and commenting on the price of razor blades. And me, who has to know absolutely everything, says, "So, how many razor blades do you get through in a week?" And he says, "I don't know." I said, "Well, how long does a packet of razor blades last?" He said, "This is really long." And I thought, "Oh shit." And then I thought, why do I need to know how many razor blades Mark gets through in a week, or how long a packet of razor blades lasts for him? It's his issue, not mine. And so I then realised that it wasn't the only thing I had to know everything about. So that became a new skill set for me. It was like to be able to step back and say, I actually don't need to know this information. It's not important to me at all. And did I do well?
Yes, you certainly did, because I still don't know how many razor blades I use. And you know, yeah, entirely. So you know, being comfortable without knowing all the data is actually quite a good idea. And that's because you're convinced that I'm not lying to you. Actually, that's probably the real thing. Because if you thought I was lying to you, you'd have to bloody know, wouldn't you? I mean, This is women's truth bump, isn't it? Gets triggered by men all the time.
If you were spending my money, I'd probably want to know as well. But you weren't. You were spending your own money on razor blades.
There we go.
Just...
There we go.
Yeah. So anyway, skill sets.
Okay, skill sets. Well, I just haven't got any. I've just totally forgotten.
You've got some amazing skill sets, darling.
It's just not getting cross, isn't it? It's just not getting cross. It's just yeah. Are you going to speak or shall I speak? Right.
Sorry.
Having had a few relationships and having mucked up all of them properly, due to my own lack of, stance, I've now entered this relationship with some skill sets one of those is I know how to manage myself and not lose my temper and get cross about silly little things. That's really important. And the other thing is that I know how to manage her in that I don't look up to her and I don't look down on her either. I look directly at her most of the time. And that means that she gets all of the mercies that you'd expect to give to another human being who is just muddling through.
Yeah.
And there is a compassionate stance. So I know that you're a human being, which therefore means that I know you're perfectly capable of being absolutely dazzling in 1 minute and an utter idiot in the other. And I'm really careful about, I'm careful about those things, you know,
Yes.
because, you know, all human beings have this value, and that is that they're, for a percentage of the time, they're utterly brilliant. And then for a percentage of the time, they're utter fools. And the question is about being able to tell the difference and look after the person
Yes.
in whichever state they happen to be in. So you're a clarity coach, you're a fully tooled up osteopopolov, you've been to Yale, you probably know God, but that doesn't mean that you can't occasionally fall absolutely and utterly to pieces.
Oh yes,
And
you've seen that a few times.
I have, and just need a little toleration and a little hug and possibly a hot beverage. And I don't have to be disappointed you in that way. I recognize your own mortality in that you can't be perfect all the time.
Of course that would be a lot. That would be a big thing to live up to.
Exactly. And therefore that is also true in my own case. You know, whilst I want to be in charge of my mood and I want to be great company, there are occasions when I am less than.
You are. There are, yes.
And you're very tolerant about that sort of thing, and it doesn't turn itself into an issue that we can then argue about for a decade.
We don't argue about it at all.
That is the upgrade of this relationship now, against all of my other relationships.
And I think for me too. Because, so I know that fairly early on, you had some days when you were having a bit of a black mood, and you went very quiet, and I thought, oh, what have I done wrong? And then I realised I hadn't done anything wrong, that it was just Mark having one of those days. And so then you said, oh, I'm not angry with you, I'm just in a bit of a, I forget how you described it, to be honest, but it was what our friend George Pransky would call a low mood.
Absolutely.
And then you take yourself off down the studio and do a little brain reset, wouldn't you? And come back, and you were fine.
Yes.
And the really, really key thing about that was that you didn't blame it on me, and I didn't blame it on myself. I didn't think it was my fault. I don't take responsibility for your moods or your emotions.
Thank you.
Yes. And likewise, you don't do that to me. But you're there for me when I'm having a difficult time over something. And I'm there for you in whatever way I can be when you're having a bad day.
Yes. But inherently, I don't turn you into my carer or my support.
No, and likewise.
And you don't turn me into your carer or support. So that's pretty important too. So you never totally fall to pieces because you're not that irresponsible, right? You never give me the burden of your misery. You just don't do that. You never blame me for the fact that your life is horrible.
Well, I don't blame you for anything. No, it's nothing.
Is this not the upgrade?
It is a massive upgrade. It is. And it's partly about, I think there's a number of components in this. And one of them is that whole thing about recognizing when it's your thinking which is generating the emotions, and then noticing when maybe you just woke up in a low mood or a bad mood.
Yes. How can you not be in a low mood periodically? This is the interesting thing.
Yeah.
You know, as a partner, being thoroughly disappointed in your significant other because they're like a human being is massively unreasonable. And yet, do I not see at least a huge swathe of relationships run under those conditions?
And I remember my mum saying that when she and my dad argued, it was because when you marry somebody, you want them to be perfect. And so we get cross when they're not. And at the time, I just believed her in the gullible way that children do. And looking back, I think, that's absolute nonsense.
Absolutely.
How can you expect anyone to be perfect?
Well, actually, one could tweak that small print.
Yeah.
Because I do think you're perfect in that there has never been another Sorrel Pindar. So there is no comparison. You're absolutely an original. You're an original and unique. And actually, this is the whole thing. You know, when we compare our partners against some other vague perfection and then hold them against it. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yes.
It's just an opportunity to be nasty to someone, really, and to point out
It kind of is an opportunity.
Point out your disappointments in them.
And why would you want to be nasty to somebody you love?
Because you don't love them at that moment. Love is real, and that might be the next conversation. Love is a state and a condition and a behavior. It's not a.
This is true.
You know, it's.
And actually, so that's an interesting thing. So I remember. So you know, I did this podcast with Callan Hammond, who's another relationship coach. But our preliminary conversation before the podcast, he referred to something that Ram Dass said about being in love. It isn't about, oh my God, I've fallen over and I can't, which it feels like, but actually you are in that space of love. Because having met that person and all those kind of amazing, it's all chemical cocktail stuff, isn't it really? It opens you out into that space of love. And now I forgot why I was telling you this. Oh, so it's like we fall in and out of our understanding of how things work. We go from inside out to outside in, thinking about things. And similarly, we go in and out of love. So when I'm in a space where I'm feeling the love and I'm sort of in the inside out understanding of things, then everything's really happy and fine and dandy, pretty much. If you fall out of all of that at the same time, you lose the consciousness and you fall back into your old programs and you start believing that something out there is causing this feeling in here and all of those sorts of things. And you've kind of lost your connection with the love. So it's going to take you to a really bad place, but it's not permanent, it's temporary.
Is it not just the confusion of smoke, lights and mirrors and some dodgy sonics which you may or may not misinterpret? Is it not just, the perfection of my world has moved to the left by 5 degrees and I am now confused? Is it not something tiny and trivial normally?
Oh, I see. That it might be something trivial that triggers it.
The sort of thing that you could handle yesterday with bags of aplomb and just can't manage today. Is that not how we are?
Yeah, absolutely true.
So you've got these two deeply inconsistent variable entities trying to have a relationship and pretend that they're reliable and have integrity. And yet nothing could be further from the truth.
I think you can't be reliable, but you can try to keep the integrity. Whilst acknowledging
most people can't even have a poo every day.
Oh,
let alone be reliable.
I don't know where you got that data from.
From my medical background.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right. Well, your medical background is mostly with soldiers. I don't think it counts.
I suppose what we're talking about is dependability, and it's a fiction, and this is why relationships have to be so clever. Where we have to be so clever with one another and so imaginative and so insightful with one another.
Yeah.
Because when you're not that way with your significant other, they won't be that way for long. I think that relationships and love, I think love takes a lot of maintenance, like growing something. It requires our best attention.
I don't think it's as much hard work as we were led to believe. But it does require attention and presence.
That's hard work, mate.
Is it?
Most people can't pay attention for longer than 2.5 minutes.
Oh, it comes to practice.
And this is probably why most relationships are doomed to failure.
Oh, you're such a pessimist.
I just want to be really cheerful about stuff.
I think it might be time to bring the lupines on if we don't.
No, we're just being...
No, but seriously, if you believe all the misinformation out there, then that probably does make it hard work because you're swimming against the tide. So if you believe that your partner causes what you're feeling and creates the anger inside you or whatever it might be, and if you believe that you have to be right all the time, if you believe you are right all the time, all of these things, you're swimming against the tide when you're trying to be present and exist in that space of love. When you let go of all those, it's kind of like programming from childhood, really, isn't it? Let go of that, at least recognize that it's just programming and it's not true, even though you then from time to time will actually drop back into that because we do. Old habits die hard, that thing of going to the cupboard where you used to keep the cereal when you moved it to the other cupboard 3 years ago. That kind of thing.
So we're basically talking about trying to stay conscious.
Yeah, but we are. It is
because when you've fallen back to your own programs, it's because you're not paying attention. You've fallen back to your own programs.
Absolutely.
And so when you've fallen back to your own programs, that's what you're investing in your life. Old program stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. You see, this is where this is the important thing. I mean, you know, we hear a lot about love. It's in songs and it's in books and there's lots of poems about it.
Yeah.
But there's no proper guidance on the matter.
Not really.
Not
no.
really.
No.
And it actually requires one's benign attention and a total cap on one's malice. Just keep my malice out of this. And from there, you might stand a chance. You've got a chance because you might be decent company. Up until that point, it's all desperately, desperately variable, which is why I'm on a relationship thingy, which is what this is.
Program?
Yeah, possibly.
Live stream?
What we're basically saying is that you're definitely going to break some eggs. But you know, lay another kind of thing. I mean, you know, it's not a Disney perfection. It's none of this. I think a relationship is the sum of its misunderstandings and then the triumph of how the pair of them get over them.
Yes.
You know, that's a robust relationship. It's a relationship that it's a thing that can take some side moves and whatnot and be okay with it. And you know, there's a presence with the two people who are in it, who actually want to stay there.
Yeah.
Because it's actually quite a pleasant place to be as opposed to a horrid place to be. We've been watching this couples therapy on the TV. It's marvelous, really good. And there's this whole string of couples wobbling across the screen, and they are pissed off with each other. It's just so cross. And there's the education, you know, because to be upset with your partner is to reveal your own weakness. They've dug you in a place where you are not integral, or you had no defense or had no integrity. That's why it hurts. That's why it hurts.
We've both been digging together, most probably.
And they've both been digging together. Yeah. And it's about a dominant stance, isn't it? It's about who's in charge most of the time.
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Yeah. And if you're in charge, can I complain about your service? It's an
interesting thing because from my personal experience, one person has more direct power. And the other person has indirect power because they don't have the direct power so it's all about being passive aggressive and passive resistance and those sorts of things.
So they're the ones who either allow it to happen or don't allow it to happen. So there's the person who initiates the plan and then the person who goes along with it.
Or sabotages things or whatever. But the issue is that they're not really communicating properly, they're not considering each other's needs properly, they're not their boundaries are poor.
Is that because one of them is taking charge of the relationship and the other one resents it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Because the person who's taking charge of the direction at that moment hasn't actually got the skills to get volunteers with them. They have to have press people, like, you know.
Okay, can I go back to like when I was with the guy in the States?
Yeah.
Without naming any names.
Yeah.
So I came back after being with him for 5 years. It didn't last much longer because we couldn't agree to live in the same country, which is quite funny, really, isn't it? And I pretty quickly realised, I hadn't noticed it when I was in the relationship, but as soon as I stepped out of it, I realised how controlling he'd been and how I had to justify every action I took. But I hadn't even been aware that was, well, I had kind of I was semi-aware, I was constantly justifying my actions, but it hadn't occurred to me that I shouldn't really I should not have to be doing that. Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask voters, if you are watching this, please say something in the comments. Otherwise, we don't know there's anyone out there.
There's no one out there. They're looking at the football.
Well, maybe they are.
You can talk as freely and as openly as you want.
Yeah, but they'll watch it later on in replay. So I'm afraid you've still got to mind your manners, even if there's nobody watching right this minute. So anyway, yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. I've lost my thread.
You're talking about what's his face in the States.
Yeah,
being very, very controlling. And you not realising it until you got out of there.
Yes. But then once I got out of it, I knew that was something to watch out for. And it's up to me to assert my boundaries and to say something I could have said had I realised it's none of your business what I do with my time. I mean, it was about me not devoting every hour of every day to working on my PhD thesis, which, to be fair, I never finished, but, you know, I didn't finish it because I realised I didn't really need it anymore, which is a different conversation. But had I set up my boundaries and said, it's not up to you to tell me what, you know, how much time I spend on study to how much time I spend on other things. It's my life, it's my decision. I didn't do that. I just let him sort of dictate stuff. And then I'd say, oh, no, I don't think so. But
can I ask what year this was?
Oh, I came back in 1985.
So in 85, were women more submissive than they are now? Were they less developed? Of course they were.
Well, maybe, but I was a bit of an arch feminist.
You're an arch feminist who submitted to this control, this casual control.
I don't think I fully submitted to it, but I had to deal with it on a daily basis. It's like, Sorrel, what are you doing that for? Why aren't you studying? Well, and
was he older than
give
you?
justification. Yeah, about 5 years. So all I'm saying is that I was defending myself and I was doing what I wanted to do, but I was having to constantly justify why I was doing it.
You're having to defend yourself.
Explain myself to him.
Yes.
But had I just laid down some boundaries, like, actually, it's not up to you to decide, you know, as my children would have said, you're not the boss of me.
Well, that's right. At the front end, had you recognised the assault, in effect?
I could have put it an assalt, but yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I would.
Well, yes,
I would. You bloody pick through my diary with your red pen. Who do you think you are?
Well, you haven't been in my diary. But
No.
I bloody had a diary in those days. It was almost like, well, here. It's quite funny, really, isn't it? Anyway, so what I'm saying is that that's a skill set that I lacked around boundaries. So although I still kind of did decide what I was going to do, and I did what I wanted to do, he didn't control me to that degree. It was a justification, which was tiring. What I realised when I came out of that was how much energy I'd consumed justifying myself.
Having to explain yourself to this geezer.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, that's just one little thing, really.
Well, no, it's a huge, huge, huge thing. Is that you had to live your life underneath his inspection, and you know, approval. In fact.
Yes, exactly.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. You don't do that to your friends, do you?
No, you don't do it to your friends.
You do that to an employee.
You might say to a friend, are you sure that's a good idea? But you wouldn't say, why are you doing that? No, not in that way.
Not in the manner of one who, well, I'm not going to sign it off unless you explain it to me fully.
It wasn't quite that bad.
Except that you had to do it a lot.
Yeah, it was constant. It's that hair shirt, what I describe as the hair shirt phenomenon,
where
it just feels like you're wearing this slightly irritated. I've never worn a hair shirt, so I have absolutely no idea what it feels like, but I imagine it's pretty uncomfortable. Otherwise, Thomas More would not have worn underneath his, whatever it was they wore in those days, underneath his shirt thing. It was a way of making himself good with God, apparently. Anyway, that's by the by. Yeah, it's a hair shirt of that constant. It's judgment. It's like slightly judgmental. Disapproval. That's what I'm looking for. It was disapproval, because we used to go to New York and stay with his mum, and his sister would be there with her. Well, they weren't yet married, probably. Her fiance, and they say, "Come on, Sorrel, let's go out. Let's go and go to a gig, go to a bar, whatever." And he'd be back in the house working. And there was, do you know what the thing about all of this is? From a three principles perspective, I can now see that the disapproval is in my head, because it may be that what I thought was disapproval was not, say, quite what I thought it was. I only know what my experience was. So, and I can't go back and say to him, were you disapproving of me at the time? It might have just been care. It's like, are you sure this is a good idea? You may never get that PhD, and you want it, don't you? And I just said, yeah, I do want it, but I also want to go out and have some fun. But my internal program may be what converted that into disapproval. So,
was he Mr. Fun?
It could be sometimes.
On percentage?
Not on the same degree that his sister was, or his brother. But anyway.
So we're talking successful, but sort of
yeah,
cheddar.
cheddar
Well,
as opposed to Stilton.
Yeah. Successful cheddar, reliable, consistent, not exactly the sort of thing that's going to tell a good joke, but it'll be there.
Anyway,
Yellow.
that's enough on him.
Okay.
We've got 5 minutes left.
That's marvellous.
We want to keep the people coming back. So what are we going to do next week? It's like being on children's television. It's bizarre. Shall we just like take one of the common myths about relationships each week and work through them?
Mm-hmm.
Pick up the George Pransky. Yeah, listen. So he's got all these chapters. Oh, the first myth is about compatibility. Oh, I like this one. He starts with a Jack Sprat. Who on here he's watching this does not know Jack Sprat? Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. So twixt them both, they cleared the cloth and licked the platter clean. So some people say, oh, they were incompatible because she liked lots of fat on her food and he didn't. He liked his meat lean. But that meant they shared the same bit of meat and she ate the fatty bit and he ate the lean bit. And so what George Pransky would say is that any difference can be interpreted either as a bad thing or a good thing. Anyway.
And it totally depends upon how fond you are as to which way you look at that.
Or it depends on what your understanding is, because if your understanding is that any difference is going to cause a problem in your relationship, then that's probably what will happen. And if you say, oh, differences make for more fun, make for more diversity, make for more, I don't know, surprises, then you'll get more fun and surprises. So
you make your day with the way you look at it.
Yeah, you do.
You make your day with the way you look at it. And you make the relationship with the way you look at it.
Kind of, yes, absolutely.
Well, that's all right then. Bloody marvellous. Me and the rabbit are going to decide to look at this relationship in a really positive sort of bunny sort of way. And I reckon that will be fine.
Did look at it in a positive bunny
I'm
sort of
doing
way.
it for the people in TV land, love.
And so am I.
Okay, good. Oh, bless you. Is that it?
Well, we've got 3 minutes.
Oh, right.
No one's asked any questions or made any comments.
Well, that's because there's no one there.
I think there's nobody there.
So, yes, there's no one there. But that's right.
Oh, well, you know what?
I feel quite liberated that there's no one there.
What we kind of need is a cliffhanger.
I don't know, but we will be back next week.
We'll definitely be back next
discussing all
week.
Kinds of things.
What on earth is that rabbit doing?
It's an ear stand.
You just dropped Bunny. Is it a he or a she or a them? You dropped Bunny on its head. On its head. I'm shocked.
Are you trying to levy animal cruelty at me just to close the last 3 minutes of this?
I'm just trying to make stuff up to fill the time.
How much longer have we got? And nobody's there.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes of talking to nobody.
All right.
Even my sister, who I love dearly, hasn't come this week. I'm so disappointed. Never mind. Anyway, shall we just wind up now, because there's no point us prattling on for another 2 minutes unless there's something either funny or deeply profound to be said.
There's all of those things. If you're going to have a relationship, you're obviously a nutter, because they are doomed to failure. But one can have a lot of time, a lot of fun in that catastrophic crash and burn, which is where all the thrills are.
Do you mind?
And it's frankly, it's the only game in town, love.
I'm not planning on having any crashing or burning. You've done all the crashing and burning you need to do.
Oh, I see.
You don't want any more, do you?
No.
No, that's good.
No. But that's what happens after all the crashing and burning.
I think I just...
You wake up as a moderately civil human being and stand a chance of being able to be really close to people without upsetting them. Because you can say sorry a lot.
Next time when we go live,
yeah,
I think it might be a good idea for you to face the camera more, because I don't know whether anyone heard anything you said on this.
They did, because I have exquisitely trained vocally bits and know all about projection.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll
possibly.
watch the replay and see.
So you're suggesting that I'm the one who's doing the mumbling?
No, I was suggesting that you were
I
aiming your
can't
voice.
wait
You were
to watch the
turning
replay. I can't
towards
wait to watch the
me.
replay. But it's because
Anyway.
I like you.
I know, and I like you too, sweetheart. My best friend as well.
All right.
Okay, shall we say goodbye to all the lovely people?
Well, after all that waffle, we might as well. See you next week.
Say
Something a bit more
See,
interesting.
I'm rubbish at doing rabbits. Do the rabbit for me.
Thank you very much for watching. This is bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.